Hi, my name's Rebecca, and I'm here to teach you all the things that you did not learn from your piano teacher growing up. I'm really glad that you're here. In my studio and on this channel, we talk a lot about playing the piano and making music every single time you sit down to play the piano. One thing that's really important to me is being able to play safely. And what I mean by that is to protect your hands. Now, unfortunately, I must be a very stubborn person because I have to learn everything the hard way. And I had some wrist injuries, back injuries, and even hand injuries from playing the piano, which seems absolutely ridiculous, but it's a real thing, especially if you're playing for a really long time without stopping and you're consistently practicing. I think that practicing is really important, but we have to do it safely because doing the same thing over and over again wrong is going to create the wrong kind of muscle memory. So, here today, I'm here to teach you the top 10 things that I see in my studio that students struggle with over and over and over again. And I'm going to give you some quick fixes. You don't want to be like me. You don't want to have the injury. You want to prevent the injury. So come with me. I'll show you those 10 things and how to easily put them into practice in your own life. This is your first time here, welcome to my studio. I'm pretty new to YouTube, but I'm so excited to be here. I'm getting a new audience here for this platform of making beautiful music every single time you sit down at the piano. So make sure that if you're not subscribed, you hit the subscribe button. And I would love to have you comment below about one of your things that you struggle with the most with playing the piano. If your hands look like this when you're playing, with your fingers sticking up when other fingers are pushing notes down, that is showing too much tension in these tendons here on your hand. When you pay attention to what you're feeling on your hand here, you will start to feel the tension here. So we want, as much as possible, to keep nice, relaxed hands. So we're going to not play anything at all and just think of floating our hands up and coming down smoothly. So these are nice and relaxed, but strong. When you push a note down, you're thinking of just that note moving and everything else staying relaxed. So especially this happens with the 3 and the 4 finger. So if you're pressing the 3 and the 4 finger down, I'll show you in my right hand, and you're seeing this happen or this happen, keep the note pressed down, and I want you to think of relaxing this down. And then float your hand to the piano and try to do it again until you're able to do it without your fingers sticking up. This happens a lot when beginners are starting to play chords. So I'll play a C chord here. A lot of times this number 2 finger will end up sticking up, or the number 4 finger. So in that case, I want you to keep the chord down and make sure that these are relaxed. All right? Float again and try to play without lifting up those fingers. If you are playing along and you're trying to reach for a note, and your wrist here starts to look like it is turning, so your left would be turning in and your right would be turning in this way. This is a very unnatural way to play to reach for notes. We always want our wrists to be perpendicular to the piano, like it's forming a T. So the horizontal notes of the piano and the straightness of the wrist. So as your hand moves along, the wrist is going to be moving this way instead of turning the arm either direction. So as we move down here, the wrist still stays straight and the wrist still stays straight. So if you're ever having to move your entire arm in a crazy way, that is not keeping the tension out of your wrist. We want it to stay perpendicular to the piano. A lot of times students have issues with where to go with their wrists. How bent do we want the wrist to be? This was actually the cause of some of my injury. So when we're sitting down at the piano, we want to think of your arm as a straight being. It's not that you never move your wrist, but you're not going to be playing with your hand just like this, okay, with this curve. Also, so if you have your hands up like this, you can feel the tension here. That's not going to be good as you're playing around. So being too high is not good, but also being too low. If you have your wrists below the keys of the piano, we have my fingers here and then the wrist is dropping below. I see this all the time with my students. You need to think of making that wrist nice and straight so that it is one continuous line from your hand all the way up to your elbow. Even just doing that a few times, it starts to hurt my wrists. The other thing is that when you are releasing, we do want to have a slight bend in our wrist. So I'm going to play a C chord over here, and I'm going to release it. We don't just bring it straight up like that. We're going to do a little float. So it's a little bend of the wrist, but then it goes back to normal. So this is okay, and actually that's a wonderful way to release. We just don't want to be playing this way all of the time. Another thing that I see far too often is hands spread out in a not neutral position. And what I mean by that is this. If you think of your hand like this is the position that is the neutral hand position. We don't have our thumb sticking out weirdly. We don't have our pinky sticking out weirdly anytime we're in a neutral position. We just have in a nice curved hand where our hands are neutral. This is what we want to return to always. So a thing that I see a lot is especially with students who have smaller hands. My hands are not tiny, but they're not huge either. And so for a long time, I struggled with doing octaves. So if we're playing an octave, obviously my hand is not in a neutral hand position because my hands are separated here. But then when I go to play something else, we're going to have the hand come back to neutral. So for example, if we're doing some octaves in a row, we're going to think come back to neutral in the middle of those. And now this looks, I'm doing it exaggerated, it looks a little funny right now, but it is going to really help you in the long run to not just keep your hands stiff and not moving. Now look at the difference. And then you're always coming back to a neutral hand position instead of keeping it spread open. This is another one that causes a lot of my students a lot of problems, and that is not using your rotating wrist and using just your fingers only. If you can see these tendons on the top, watch with me just moving my fingers. You see how those tendons are moving? Now, if I'm moving around like this, my tendons, of course, are still moving, but not as stiffly. All right, so this comes into play when you're doing something that is maybe a fifth apart. Okay, so we have, I'm going to do from an F to a C. So instead of just hitting F with my thumb, keeping this completely still, and hitting the C, if you do that without moving your wrist at all, you'll start to feel the tendons in your hand. Now I'm going to think of moving my hand like I'm opening a door. If you think of this movement, and right now I'm exaggerating it, we're not going to do it quite this big when we're doing the piano. However, if you're thinking of this movement back and forth, it's going to save these tendons from having to work as hard. All right, so now look at the difference. This also helps keep the hand in a neutral hand position, which is what I was just talking about. So it's a rotating. Now, the one thing that we need to be aware of is not doing this from the shoulder and having the elbow jut out like this. This is not a shoulder or an elbow movement. This is only a wrist movement. Your elbows should be at your sides, and it's just moving like you're opening a door. You can try this on both sides. And I actually have students just pretend there is a doorknob right here. Open the doorknob and then play down here. And you can really exaggerate it at first. When we play, we're not going to be moving our hand over that much. However, this just gets the movement in there so that you can feel the turning of the wrist. And then the faster you go, you can see the rotation. A lot of times we are taught, and of course I do teach my students this, that we need to have curled hands like this, not flat fingers. However, you need to make sure that the curl is appropriate. We don't want to be too curled this way so that you're playing on your nails. I've had students play on their nails before, especially students who have really wide fingers. They tend to play on their nails so they can reach the notes up here in between the black notes. However, we want to be playing on the tips of our fingers, kind of between that little divot right here that comes up and the very tip edge of the finger. It's right in between those two, okay? And it's just a nice relaxed way of playing. So I would like you to try this exercise with me. Keep your hands totally flat on the piano like this and just try to play some notes. Feel what that feels like. You're feeling tension in your fingers when you do that. You will not be able to move them quickly, and these tendons are overworking. So now take those flat fingers and just curl them up a bit. Not on top of your nails, but just in between those 2 points like I talked about, and then try to play. So it's nice and relaxed, but you have a nice shape to your fingers. We need to also have strong fingers. So if you'll notice, we have a large knuckle here in the middle, but we also have a little knuckle right here. And some students, especially those who are hyper flexible, tend to bend that knuckle so that it is like this. This I call a finger that is not strong. So we want this part to be straight. The part that is bending is this larger knuckle, but this part is going to be straight for all of your notes when you play. So I'm going to do it this way so that you can see a little bit better. But when you push down, this is very strong right here. This is not bending like this. If you see this, this is wrong, and this is going to strain actually little tiny muscles in your fingers. So if you find yourself bending that knuckle, then I want you to remind yourself this is strong. One thing that has helped me is by using putty. If you have some putty or Play-Doh, this is a great exercise to really teach you how to keep your fingers strong. This is some therapy putty that I purchased off of Amazon, and I use it in my studio to show students how to keep their fingers strong. So you just take one finger and you're going to stick it into the therapy putty, and you're going to keep that knuckle nice and straight. That is a strong finger. That is not a bending finger. One thing that I want you to remember is that tension is not your friend. Tension is not your friend in any area, but especially in playing any musical instrument or singing, which is using the instrument of your voice. We want to watch for tension in the tendons of your hand, in your wrists, in your elbows, your shoulders, and your neck and back. If you are feeling tension in any of those places, I want you to close your eyes and do the float method of your hands, where you just lift them up and let them fall strongly down on the piano. Close your eyes and really envision all of the parts of your body that you are using when you are playing the piano, from your neck down. And it's almost a yoga practice to sit and be mindful of all of those muscles. So you're thinking of your head, you're moving your head around, you're thinking of your neck, your shoulders should be up, back, and down, your elbows to your sides, your wrists nice and strong but relaxed, and then having relaxed tendons here. If you have tension in any of those areas, it's going to show up in your piano playing and you will feel pain. When we sit down at the piano, we need to make sure, first of all, that we have good posture. Posture is something that I've struggled with my whole life. So this is how I hurt my back, was by slumping over while I was playing because it was more comfortable. So I want you to sit with your shoulders up nice and straight so that your arms, when they're down to your sides, they form a nice 90-degree angle. So then when you reach out to touch the piano in front of you, you should not be this close so that your hands have to be scrunched up. That's part of the problem, is the piano seat. Or if you're too far back and your arms are stretched too far ahead of you, that's not going to be comfortable for you either. So we want somewhere in between where we can sit with our arms. If they're down at your sides, they're a nice angle here. And then when you reach out in front of you, they remain at the angle. I don't know exactly the angle, but they remain at that nice angle. So then you can play with nice posture instead of being slumped over. We as a society are so used to being slumped over all the time that it's really easy to bring that into our piano playing, and we need to make sure that we're not doing that also. A lot of times when people start out playing the piano for the first time, they're really excited and they spend a lot of time at the instrument. That's good. We need to work on our practicing, and that's definitely something that we need to consistently be doing. However, if you are spending more than 30 minutes at a time, you need to take a break. Take 30 minutes and then get up, walk around, shake your arms out, shake your neck, do some stretches, and then you can come back. If you really feel the need to come back because you're really in the zone and you're excited, that's great. But it's just like with everything else. We don't want to spend too much time doing one particular thing without getting out and stretching. Think of driving the same way. If you're driving across the country, you're not going to want to sit for 5 hours and not do anything because you're going to get cramps. It's going to be not very comfortable after a while. So make sure that you are taking breaks as well in your piano playing. And this is the last tip, and the one that is the most important. The number one tip: if you are having pain, you need to stop. I was a vocal performance major, and so I learned a lot about the voice. And that's the number one thing that I tell my singers to do, is if you feel pain, you need to stop, because that means there is something not right. As an adult, when I took piano lessons again, I came back to it, I would have pain for the first time, because guess what? I'm not a young kid anymore. I'm 45. It's okay. I'm allowed to tell the world. I'm 45 years old. And being 45, I have learned that my body just isn't what it used to be. I can't endure the same things. So for years, I abused it by playing the piano, doing things wrong. And then when I got into my 40s, I realized I just can't do that anymore. So if I would have pain, I would talk to my piano teacher about it, and she would tell me, oh, this is what I'm seeing. This is how you need to work on that. So if you feel pain, you need to stop and figure out why. And then maybe there's an easy fix. Let me know in the comments below if you are having pain in some area, and maybe it is an easy fix. If it's not something that I can help you with, at least I can point you in the right direction so that somebody who's around you can watch and analyze how you're playing. So be safe. And we want to, again, protect our bodies so that we are able to make music from now until forever. We don't want the piano to be just something that young people play. We want the piano to be something that you can play forever and continue to make music forever. Have you ever learned those things? I really had not learned them until I started playing on my own. After I graduated from college with my music degree, I started my own studio. And then I started seeing those same issues in my own students. I hope that you don't have to learn the hard way and that you work on these things. They're easy and they're easy to implement. We want to have healthy hands, healthy backs all the way through our lives so we can continue to make music all the way through the rest of our lives. Have fun practicing and let me know how I can help.